To keep everybody up to date, I'm running for mayor for the city of Victoria, and I want to do a daily blog, video blog, to basically talk about what I'm doing every day and how this campaign is going to work, as well as talk about the things that I stand for, what my platform is. So the first step, of course, was to get the paperwork in, which it's in. I did that yesterday, paid the $100 deposit, and I'm officially on the ballot for running for mayor. Now the next step is to meet the needs of the official traditional media in the area, and that's primarily two papers, right? We've got the Times Colonist and Vic News?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, does the Times Colonist ask for YouTube? Probably not.
No, it doesn't.
What do they ask for?
YouTube.
What do they ask for?
Times Colonist asks for Twitter, Facebook, and website.
Right. So the three officially supported or commonly supported media forms, social media forms for politicians. But I'm going to have a YouTube channel as well. That's one of the big differences between my campaign and everybody else's, is I'm going to be actively using video to both talk about the things that I want to talk about, but also cover what I do. The reason why I'm using video is because while there is at least some level of print media coverage of the municipal elections, especially in the city of Victoria, and there'll be some radio as well. I would expect, if I get at least some level of acceptance or momentum, that I'll get on the radio as well, probably at some point. But TV-wise, there's not going to be a whole lot of coverage, and so there's not going to be a whole lot of video for any of the candidates. And the fact that I can create my own, and I've got both the equipment and the skill sets to be able to edit together, an actually decent-looking video, is going to make me stand out, I think, in the election. So, and is probably one of the biggest reasons that I might actually get some special attention. I think the things that we want to talk about are just openness and transparency, and using the video to allow for that, and the two-front approach, talking about having these short, less than 5 minutes for sure, but ideally down to around a minute on a daily basis, that actually sort of gives a little update of what we're doing in the campaign, and whatever key thoughts that we come up with for the day are, whether it's reflective on the campaign itself or specific platform issues and whatnot. The other side is, I'd like to have that running behind the scenes bit, that's at least maybe kept down to a half an hour or something, but something that's got the content of what we're doing and showing how we're actually doing it. The behind the scenes approach, so that if somebody actually really does get interested and want to follow what I'm doing at a more deeper level, that the information's there. Plus, it also ensures transparency, because people will see if they want. There's the potential for having the completely uncut video of this available online, just so people can see everything, the whole story, which is kind of my point. I want to have a whole story approach.
Okay, so can I interject and say you're talking rather meta at the time, and you're talking about talking? What is it that you're actually going to be talking about?
I'm going to be talking about how I think a city should be run and what the position of mayor's responsibilities should be. I'm also going to talk about public engagement and how to involve the community in city planning and its operations. But I do want to have that meta conversation as well, where we talk about the process about talking about these subjects. And I also want to bring in outside ideas and innovations to try and shake things up. And that includes doing perhaps some viral marketing style of video as well, like the music video we were talking about yesterday. that's about equality, right? You want your city to treat all citizens equally. And because the city doesn't do enough to engage all of its citizens, it's not treating them equally. It's treating the squeaky wheels, which we've got them on camera complaining about that very fact, that the squeakiest wheels get the grease. It's because there's nothing to really let the community in on the conversation except for the squeaky wheels. They're the ones who actually care enough to go above and beyond the expected effort to actually get engaged. I think the barrier is too high. It's way too hard to get involved in the way the city operates, even just to pay attention to it, because you don't have that media coverage, and the coverage that is available, if your council is recording video, which Victoria's just started, and
they record it in SD so that you try and watch it full screen. It's like you're back in the 80s watching video.
yeah. Well, and it's the structure of the meeting too. Like, it's not, there's nothing that they do in the meeting that says, if you're a newcomer, welcome, here's what we're going to talk about. They just go right into the conversation, and they often rebuff even staff's efforts or consultants' efforts to give some sort of context to the conversation before it starts. They just get right into it all the time. And then they have no sort of structure or systematic approach to the conversation. They just open the floor to anybody to give whatever input they want at any given time.
It's really wasteful.
It is. It's wasteful. It's you could be much more creative with your time if you structured it a little better. You could be a lot more insightful by actually presenting an order and making sure that there's check boxes to ensure that every area of the conversation is actually touched upon.
And for me, as a student of government, one of the first things that we are taught in our Masters of Public Administration program is that when you're looking at government programs, you want to look at efficiency and you want to look at effectiveness. If you try and apply those lenses to the operations of the city of Victoria, it'd be hard to argue that they're either efficient or effective, let alone efficient and effective.
Yeah. Yeah. Although Jane Jacobs would disagree to a certain point.
I don't care about Jane Jacobs. She's dead.
Well, she makes the point that it's a guardian role, and guardians shouldn't be focusing on being you can get too focused on efficiency as a government, on having these statistical milestones to meet, and you get obsessed by the numbers to the point that you actually forget what it is you're trying to achieve.
And that's kind of like right now I'd like to pull up one of those high glossy versions of the 2013 annual report from the city of Victoria, where they give you just all these mindless numbers.
Yeah, and that's definitely something we're going to touch on in the campaign, is reporting information and how information is communicated to the public. And like the annual report is a great example. So is the budget presentation that they had. They're both really poor communication examples, but the tools, the concepts actually could be done really well if you just structured it differently. Yeah, well, my goals would be to bring City Hall into the neighborhoods, to go out into the areas and actually see the things that we're talking about firsthand, talk to the people that we're going to affect firsthand.
If anything, I would quibble and say, if you were mayor, you'd actually bring City Hall to City Hall, right? Because if you think of the function of council and local government, like, you're supposed to be making your decisions and charting your direction in a public forum that anyone can access, anybody can report on, everyone can understand.
Well, and we need to see cooperation amongst our neighbors too. Like, there's a lot of issues that we should be not just discussing as a city of Victoria, but we should be talking to our neighbors, especially our neighbors sharing borders like Oak Bay and Esquimalt and Saanich. But, you know, there's issues that affect the whole region, and those are discussions that we ought to be having much more regularly, much more publicly, and even having council step away from the microphone and just create some structure to allow the public to discuss it with council watching and listening. Because I don't think council does enough watching and listening about what people's concerns are.
I don't know. It's just so frustrating.
Yeah.
Trying to follow the city.
It is, and it's hard to. It actually becomes a barrier in its own self that it's so frustrating and painful to listen to the conversation go away. It doesn't make any sense.
It's not a conversation. It's a series of monologues.
Yeah. They're all working. Even as a council, they don't work as a team. They've all got their own individual ideas, and they're just trying to push them forward. And there's very few situations where they actually cooperate as a team. There's no, and this is systematic of the whole council as a whole, is that they don't, like, they come up with a plan and they try and solve everything at once, and then once they've rubber stamped it and left it in staff's hands, that's it. They never come back. They never review at a later date to see, okay, how things turned out. Did what we expect to happen actually happen? And there's no systems put in place when the plan gets put to evaluate it, to make sure that it is functioning properly. Like the budgeting process is another good example, that they had they approved a budget without seeing even examples of what it might look like. No sort of deadlines along the way to determine whether this process is going off the rails or not, and no guarantee that this whole exercise is even going to function properly. Like, they just said, we're going to completely change our budgeting process, and we trust staff will be able to do it properly. There's no cooperation, there's no strategic process, there's no thoroughness to what they're doing. They're just kind of working on their own and hoping that everybody together covers all the things that need to be covered, instead of figuring out what it is they should be covering and then making sure that that process is followed.
So if you were mayor, how would you change that? What difference would your presence make?
I'd try to I'd try to put more structure into it. I'd say for these, because it's not like every council conversation is a completely new conversation. When you're talking about development, there's only so many types of development conversations that you can have, and they all have common themes amongst them. The effect that the development will have on its neighbors, the effect that it'll have on traffic flow through the neighborhood, the effect that it'll have on the impact on the infrastructure, and whether the infrastructure can handle the change in capacity. The advantage of creating our own media is that we can give more time to conversations than's ever going to be allotted by just traditional media and traditional election processes, like all candidates meetings, right? Our campaign can't be reduced to 200 words. It does a disservice to the concept of public conversation to try and crystallize all of your thoughts on the city down to 200 words. Like, how do you summarize the complex nature of running a city into a short 200-word summary? How do you talk about all the aspects without talking about them very vaguely?
Well, true. And so, if anything, the fact that our political system is a game where the shiniest, most money campaign are the ones that win is abysmal. That's why you have 27% of the population voting.
Yeah.
And so it'd be really nice and refreshing to try and engage all Victoria residents who are eligible to vote, to get them voting, because it's only when you vote that you can actually have a say in how your city's run.
Yeah. So we're going for the other 73%. That's our campaign, and that's probably our strongest simple point, is to say this campaign is a campaign for the other 73%, the people who aren't actually paying attention and don't care about their city, at least the politics that run their city. they care about the city itself. I think that's true of anybody who lives in any location. You wouldn't live there if you didn't care about it to some degree. But you don't care about the way that it's being governed because that governance is not doing enough to engage you and give you a reason to care.